If you are a director of graduate studies, if you are a dean of a graduate school, and your PhD students are coming to you struggling because they can't get the academic jobs that they wanted for so long, this video is for you. So please keep watching. Yes, academic jobs are absolutely harder to get now more than ever. I won't rehash the reasons for this, but please go back to video 1 if you want to hear more about that. Needless to say, there are things that we can control, but I'd argue it's not the cover letter and the research statement and the teaching statement we should be most worried about. We should absolutely worry about them, but there's something we're ignoring, and that is the most important controllable hurdle, the job talk. But here's the truth. We don't systematically train students to give the most important pitch of their life, the pitch that lets them convey their unique scientific contributions, that lets them cast their vision for the future and get search committees falling all over themselves to bring them into the department. So let's change that now. In the next few minutes, I'm going to share with you the 4 essential skills that I use that make up my job talk system that are helping my mentees and helping my clients get academic jobs. This isn't something that's a quick fix, but it is what I think is going to be sustainable for you and help raise your job placements over time. So let's work on the first skill. That is crafting the research story. And this is really one of the hardest things to do. One is because explaining your research is really hard because it's important to you, but it's not important to the audience. They don't care unless you can show them why they should care. And the second reason is because we tend to talk in very technical language, almost jargon. And if you've been studying this for a long time, it doesn't matter. But if you're talking to people who don't know your work, aren't familiar with your work, then it's not going to fly. And this is why I hear from faculty members that so many job candidates can't explain the big picture of their work, can't explain it to people that are not in their small circle, right? But I think this is actually a little bit unfair because we don't systematically train students to be able to articulate the big picture of their research, why their research is important on a personal level to their discipline and to society. And this is where storytelling comes in. And in case you think that scientists shouldn't tell stories, I would say stories are critical to the way that we understand the world. For example, if you watch Marvel, all the major characters have a backstory. So let's take Captain America. Captain America, Steve Rogers, is the protector of the weak, a World War II hero. But why does he do this? But we know because he was Steve Rogers, a very weak, frail young man who wanted to sign up for his army to fulfill his patriotic duty, but he couldn't do it because he was weak. He gets injected with a super serum, and then he becomes Captain America. It's because that backstory, we know that Steve Rogers is Captain America. We know why he does what he does. So I try to take this idea and implement that into the job talk. So earlier last year, I was in the middle of a one-on-one coaching session with a graduate student. Let's call them Paz. And my instinct kept telling me, I know his work or it's interesting, but I don't get why he does it. Since 2019, I've been training students for the 3-minute thesis competition. So this is a competition that I highly recommend because it's great for prepping students for the job market. It requires them to stretch themselves beyond their initial discipline and really communicate their science to a general audience. So Paz is a conservation biologist that uses genetic data and machine learning to help understand and identify species in the fossil record. I'm an economist. This sounds cool, but I'll be honest, I didn't fully understand it. And I thought it was cool, but I didn't understand why Paz was doing this work. So suddenly I remembered something they had mentioned, that they had reptiles. And I was like, that's pretty unusual for people to have reptiles as pets. Sorry if any of you are snake owners, but no problem with them, right? But Paz was an immigrant from South America. I remembered that. And I remembered that their mom was taking care of their pets while they were in school. And so I kept digging. And as it turns out, Paz watched a nature documentary when they were younger and saw that his animal friends were dying out. And he came to America to become a conservation biologist because of that. Now everything made sense. And I could marry the technical language about the machine learning to Paz's backstory, because now they could communicate their why. And this is also critically what I do in the art of the academic job talk. So you can ask similar questions like, how does this speak to my values and my background? Why am I the right person to do this? Why do I have a unique perspective on this work? What are other people getting wrong? So these are questions that you can ask your students as they hone their own job talks. Similarly, we use storytelling methods to explain complicated things. For example, I had one student that said archival data were used until we kept digging, and I found out it took them months to collect these data. They went to all of these different sources, right? So this is a way that we can really push the work forward by explaining complicated ideas through scientific storytelling. So the next strategy that we use is visual storytelling. And this is something we definitely do not learn in graduate school. I had great mentors as a grad student, high mentors if anybody is watching, but not when it came to the visual elements of academic presentations. And it really showed. I used way too many bullet points. I crammed my slides full of text. I may or may not have used clip art. I did use clip art, y'all. It was terrible. I planned my presentation around the PowerPoint template rather than the story I actually needed to tell. And I have to be honest with you, I see this a lot in job talks. And in prior years, it might not have made a huge difference, but right now, when jobs are so competitive, it really does make a difference. And so I really emphasize the importance of letting your slides breathe, like making sure that you're creating spacious and intentional slides that support your arguments and sell your ideas. And so that is why it's critically important in job talks to plan out your visual aids before you open PowerPoint, right? And really improve your presentation design skills to give your work an edge. One example that I like a lot is data visualization. I am a quant person, and even if you're a qual person, data visualization is also part of what you do. If you rely on the typical PowerPoint default, you are going to have terrible data, weird colors. That default scheme is terrible. Lots of chart junk that you don't need that's going to distract the audience. And the title is not telling the audience what you're using, why you're using the data. So thanks in part to the amazing Stephanie Evergreen. She hasn't paid me for this, but a huge shout out to her. I don't commit these problematic data visualization sins. So you can see what I had before here, where I'm not describing to the audience why this research is important, why I'm using this chart, what's important for them to focus on. Now, look at the change. So I have a more informative title, less chart clutter, direct labels on the bar so that the audience is not bouncing back and forth to look between the legend and the data. So this seems small, but this is going to make the information more accessible for the audience. So here's one tip that I would give for your students. So after you plan out the presentation, remake the bar chart so it's going to be more user-friendly. Just think headline titles, direct labels, and getting rid of all of the chart junk. And so the result is going to be that the audience is going to be more engaged. The audience is going to see how hard you work to collect the data and appreciate it even more. Okay, skill 3, developing skills in speechcraft. All right, boring academic talks are the norm. I mean, let's just face it, they are boring. And the thing that you can do, or rather your students can then do to really stand out above the crowd, is using actual public speaking skills that are going to keep the audience engaged. I don't care how many academics say a talk is not supposed to be interesting, they're lying. They're absolutely lying. And having a job talk that keeps people engaged while having the scientific receipts and rigor to stand that up is going to make all of the difference in the world. That is going to be the thing that helps keep the audience invested in you as a scholar. So I use the skills that I learned in places like Toastmasters, like TEDx coaching, to really bring those in to help the students, your students, really nail that job talk. And being nervous is completely okay. That's not what I'm focused on. I'm focused on things like using vocal variety to keep the audience engaged, learning to use the right words rather than just jargon to keep the audience not just engaged, but listening and understanding and comprehending what you're talking about. Making sure the talk is organized in a way that facilitates understanding. So using strategies with students like going through the talk and highlighting the places in your script where you want to slow down, places where you can really help the audience lean into your work. So rather than this being ad hoc, really using a tailored strategy that builds on your students' strengths to give a job talk that is going to not just impress, but make search committees say, that was a great talk. I want to learn more about them. We also think about gestures. Now, I'm not talking about this and having people be distracted, right? But making sure that you're using your body in a way that feels good to you and is emphasizing the points that you want. These things like not talking like this. I've seen a lot of speakers do this and throw their voices behind them and really take the focus off of the talk itself. So these are some of the skills that you're going to need to implement when you're giving a solid job talk. And then the last phase or skill 4 is learning how to think on your feet. To be honest, the audience Q&A is make or break for a lot of job market candidates. This is the place where even as a search committee member, especially as a search committee member, I see jobs won and lost. And a lot of times it's because we haven't prepared students to be comfortable with ambiguity and be comfortable with not memorizing answers to questions. And so it's really important for you to systematically prepare students to handle questions in a way that shows intellectual maturity and leadership and a growth mindset. And so here, what I do in the Art of the Job Talk is make sure that students know the main types of things that people are going to ask. The first thing is clarifying questions, making sure that the audience member understands a question. For example, did you use X data source? Did you use X method? These are things that you can address by integrating and making your story clear throughout the presentation, but be prepared for that. The second questions is a thing that gets people scared because maybe it's something that they can't do something about. It is a engagement with the science, and you actually want that, right? So how do you answer those types of questions? And then handling questions that are not questions, but a comment. Yeah, we all know those people. We probably have been those people. Those things get a lot of job market candidates tripped up. And we talk about specific ways on how to handle that. So one of the ways that, or strategies that I give students is to think about the question that they are most afraid that someone is going to ask, and put that question right in the middle of the job talk, because that shows confidence, that shows clarity, that shows, hey, I know that this thing is a challenge or a problem. Here are the things that I've done to address it, and here's how I'm setting myself up to answer this question more in depth in the future. That's what gets search committees excited, because they know that your student is a critical thinker, that they're not so obsessed with being right that they brush off really important questions from the committee or audience members, and that they are going to possibly be good teachers as well. So my clients don't memorize questions. They plan ahead. They use strategies like integrating those questions into their talks. They use storytelling to plan scenarios that might trip them up. For example, I had a PhD student that I was working with that works with a small marginalized population. They're worried that the audience is going to critique their sample size, right? This is something that comes up a lot in equity type research. And so we strategize. How can we talk about the challenges with surveying this population? Why are nationally representative data not appropriate, particularly when this population tends to be unhoused? How are the data that they have now going to set them up for a grant later? So instead of the student being on the defensive, my clients go on the offensive to show that they are ready to be independent tenure track faculty on day one. In the Art of the Academic Job Talk, I not only help students master all of these 4 skills, but I meet with faculty like you to talk about what's working, what's not working, and how you can start building this kind of education into the curriculum so that you don't need me forever. So if you are tired of feeling like you're at the whims of this very uncertain job market and political environment, and you want to empower students and faculty and yourself to take control of your careers, please reach out to me. I'll be honest, I only partner with 1 to 2 institutions a month because it's really important for me to be hands-on, and I am invested in your success. I'm invested in your student success because I've seen what can happen when we make this shift from ad hoc job talks to systems. And I'm so happy that this approach works, that I've helped support students, PhD students, and postdocs in becoming professors. So if you're ready to learn more, please sign up for a chat with me at the Calendly link that's below, or you can go to thestorytellingprofessor.com and let me know that you're ready to partner.